everybody. Thank you for joining this session. We're going to talk about a topic which I think is very close to my heart in terms of the challenges and opportunities of scaling to 100 million and beyond. And really, if you look at the Indian startup ecosystem, since the pandemic, we've seen a significant growth and change of trajectory of the businesses. Okay, so I have been asked to come closer, so I hope I'm audible now. You've seen a change in trajectory in terms of where the Indian ecosystem is from a maturity point of view, the startup ecosystem. In terms of really the capital that's gone in from 2021, we're talking about 42 billion. In about a year, we've had about 44 startups hit a unicorn status. But if you look at the critical mass, we have roughly about 84,000 startups in India today. And roughly about 150-ish, give or take, have hit the unicorn status. And of those, 50 to 70 have hit the 100 million ARR mark. The question is, why is that mark an important and the ability to grow? In our minds, we believe that hitting that milestone is a validation of the product, the business model, and to a certain extent, and perhaps also the resiliency the business has built to go through the market's ups and downs. And that's why that particular milestone is a critical milestone as businesses grow and evolve. If you look at the Indian startup ecosystem and across categories, we see that consumer internet probably has the highest number of businesses that have hit that critical milestone. And their growth story has been a combination of creating categories to tap into the India market opportunity, as well as perhaps some inorganic growth. The story and the approach is a little different with software companies in terms of the market expansion, in terms of expanding the product, expanding to markets outside India. And that's been perhaps a dominant theme. If we were to look at the edtech sector, we've seen M&A as a very important lever to be able to achieve that milestone. And with us, we have a panel which is very esteemed, very experienced, and we're looking forward to a very interesting discussion in terms of what are those opportunities and how does one face the challenges. So without further ado, I would like to start with the first question for the panelists, and I'm going to switch gears a bit here. Am I audible now? Perfect. You know, the first thing is that companies that move from 0 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 50, 50 to 100, at each of these stages, there are growth issues, there are priorities to be set. And my question, really, first one is to you, Rohit. As you look at the different challenges and opportunities, how would you best describe really propelling the business across different stages? How do you set those priorities?
Yeah, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Shivani. It's a very broad question, so I'll try to keep it as limited as I can. So broadly, if you think about any business or maybe a SaaS business, we look at it as a 0 to 1 journey, 1 to 10 journey, 10 to 50, and a 50 to 100 journey. And there are multiple 0 to 1s and 1 to 10s within the business, but at an overall level, there are multiple journeys. And at each of these pieces, there is very different things we do in terms of product, in terms of people, etc. So if you think about just product, and I'll take an example of product, right? The 0 to 1 journey is all about bringing in that MVP, making sure our customer understands what we are trying to build, we are solving for something specific, is it scalable or not? It's brute force, it's a lot of hustle. I mean, a lot of things that we do today, I can't even imagine what we were doing then, right? So in the 1 to 10 journey, you're trying to make this thing that's working, and where you got a PMF, you're suddenly trying to make it where it can scale, right? And this is again a combination of a lot of brute force plus setting in process, etc. The 10 to 50 is a lot more of how do I get better than, because now you're trying to put a dent in a larger part of the market. So you need to be winning more deals than you are losing, right? You need to be getting a lot more market share to be doubling year on year as you go from 10 to 50 as well. And the 50 to 100 is more in terms of how do we run this like a machinery, right? And what we do for customer acquisition, what we do for retention, all these become themes at every stage. And the product itself also defines itself to solve for that, right? What we do for existing customers versus new customers, what do we do for new geographies versus existing geographies, all these vary. I can talk about a similar journey on the people side, the kind of people we hire. I can talk about a similar journey on the operations and processes side. But basically, I think each of these phases are very different from each other. I don't think one size fits all, and probably that's something that we've learned in our own journey. While we've read enough about it, I think we'll have to go through that to learn that ourselves.
No, you're absolutely well said. It is really a situation, and one size doesn't fit all. But we have our, founder with us, and we've had the pleasure of working with Nilesh. And I can tell you from personal experience, he's super dynamic. And we've seen his business pivot. And when a business goes through multiple pivots, the question really comes up is that how do you keep evolving your business? How do you decide on those pivots? How do you evolve the business? And Nilesh, you've lived it. You've demonstrated great success. So tell us how to.
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, what I've gathered in doing what we're doing in our business is that if you are the student of the market and the customer, generally the direction becomes very clear. So you try to just build a sync with the market and the customers who exist in that market. And if you serve them and you're basically looking at how the market is evolving and you try to change your own business in context of that, then generally you find the way. And that's how we've been able to do. In doing so, there are hits and misses. Things sometimes work out, sometimes you fail in that. And sometimes you get lucky, like we did.
It wasn't luck.
So yeah.
Perfect. No, you're right. I think market and customer intimacy and knowledge, that's really critical. Let me ask you a trick question, right? The point is, how do you plan? Do you hit the 100 million mark in 2 years, 5 years, 7 years? Is there a formula? Because you don't want to get there too soon. You don't want to be late to the party. So tell us how do you plan to hit that? What's the time frame? What's a good time frame?
I think the ideal, it's hard to answer the ideal situation, but whenever you get there, you should have money in the bank.
Good one.
But I agree with what Rohit said, that, to hit that number, you have to make, a lot of your business in a scalable and process-oriented fashion so that standardization takes over, a little bit of randomization, which exists in the business in the beginning. And the more standardization you do, you pick processes which are high value and standardize them and deliver more. And sort of that's how you would end up scaling. And I think the only roadblock potentially either could be capital availability, people availability, or the market itself doesn't allow you to grow. I think if all of these three are being sorted, then one should be able to scale.
Rohit, what's your take? Give us a number. That was a longish answer, but we want a number here.
No, do all the right things and just pray. I think that is my answer. Right, that all those things are in the right market.
Srinivas, should we put you on a spot?
Sure.
Are you giving us a number?
So we've already hit 100 million in,
Yes,
in
so
revenue.
tell us.
And,
Yeah, sorry.
we've just closed a fundraising
That's true.
transaction thanks to your team. So, yeah, sorry.
You'll get
Yeah.
closer,
Can
Mike.
you hear me now?
closer.
Yeah. So from March 20 to 21, we actually doubled our revenue, and from March 22 to 22, we tripled our revenue. And I think in many ways, the pandemic kind of accelerated the shift from traditional to managed workspaces. Enterprises started figuring out that running commercial real estate internally just did not make any sense, and they didn't want to take cash on their balance sheet and invest it into capex and into fit outs, and they wanted a more flexible solution to them. So. See, for us, the commercial real estate market is our revenue, whereas for most enterprises, it's an expense. So when it's an expense, there's constant focus on reducing cost, which results in a suboptimal experience for the employees. For us, it's a revenue. We constantly focus on how we can improve the experience and deliver something new to our clients. The second is that obviously we're rentalizing capex for large enterprises and providing them a custom solution. And I think during the pandemic, what we figured was people wanted a flexible solution tailored to their growth. So we started pricing in options into our contracts where people could sort of scale up and down 100 seats, 200 seats. And obviously there's a certain price to pay for it. And that's something that truly worked for us. And also, we look at very large enterprises who take a long-term view on their space. So it's not a short-term swing space type of a requirement that we focus on. So yeah, so fortunately, even through the pandemic, we ended up growing quite rapidly.
Yeah, and to our mind, actually, Table Space and Srinivas, as he leads strategy, is a great example of a business that just started pre-pandemic around 2018 and made a lot of that very seemingly difficult situation into a great opportunity. So, kudos to you for doing that. I mean,
Thank you.
it's pretty spectacular. And, we have Imran. Imran is one of the prolific investors who's done software, consumer internet, logistics businesses. So, Imran, you've bet on the India growth story, India for the world growth story, significant number of growth trajectories. And as an investor, how do you help companies define their priorities? How do you support their growth? What's been the role of an investor in this journey?
Thanks, Shivani. So, to start with, we've done only one thing for the last 18 years, which is to back founders like Nilesh and help them scale from roughly $10 million of revenue to about 100. So we've just had one task in many ways, one playbook, and we've done this for a very long time. We're investing out of the fourth fund. But behind this, this playbook is also self-selecting into a part of the market, which is the scale-up part of the market, which is completely different from the startup part of the market. And Rohit and Nilesh both alluded to this distinction. And very quickly, just to add to what they're saying, I mean, my visual of a startup is like cycling downhill with 5 of your colleagues on you, and you trying to stay on the seat. And then you graduate to driving a car, and eventually you're flying a plane. And when you're closer to public markets, this is like manned space flight, where the systems completely take over. So when people talk about systems and processes, there is this evolution from founder-driven to senior management to completely being systems-driven. Like if you walk into an Infosys today, it's not just about individuals, right? The process, we were talking about Tata's the other time, a moment ago. So that's the visual. And so where do we come in? We come in at this very important chasm where very few startups are able to cross over from being a startup to a scale-up. And where we really help founders is to build these early systems. Often our augmentation is in areas that founders don't focus on, like M&A or fundraising or global expansion, or finding white spaces in product adjacencies. So that's the kind of work we do, and we've staffed ourselves in doing that. We've got a senior operating team at Gaja Capital, which we've done almost configured from day one to be able to help founders with this problem.
Thank you so much, Imran. That was very, very lucid and clear. And you alluded to really M&A being one of the levers. At what point, there's always a critical question as to when do you sort of augment your capabilities, your markets through M&A? What do you build versus what do you buy? What is your, sort of 2 words of wisdom on making those choices?
So wisdom is the key word because we've made our share of mistakes. Yeah. What I can tell you is the statistics on this is very clear. The statistics is that most acquisitions fail. And we know this from
You're
just
telling this
statistics.
to a banker moderating the session?
And you know the Shivani
No, I
intuitively.
don't. I say it's all a success.
But most acquisitions fail, right? But this power law applies to investing as well. So if you go just by statistics or by the average, you won't invest. You won't get out of bed if you're an investor.
Right.
So there's a way to make acquisitions work. We've seen some successful investments. We had invested in a consumer company called EuroKids. We had a very successful M&A strategy there, which eventually led to our sale to KKR, and today is thriving under their brand Lighthouse Learning. But it's very difficult, and in software businesses, it's particularly difficult. Yeah. Because you need to have not just a cultural fit, you need to have a product fit and a GTM fit. So there are many layers to making an acquisition work. So I'd say it's a value driver, but the odds are against success there, statistically.
Thank you so much. And we actually have Rohit He's enabling HR processes through Darwinbox and doing a stellar job in the marketplace. But when it comes to people and culture, as you look to scale to the $100 million mark, how do you, when you've expanded to markets outside India, you're building a category in Southeast Asia, it's a tough market to expand, culturally very different. When you look at talent and culture, how are you addressing that, as you expand in markets outside India?
No, I think it is definitely the toughest problem, Shivani, actually, because if you think about the problem in a different way, right? Like you have the capital, you have the product, you have the brand, you feel like everything is going for you and like you can screw it up, and then you realize that execution is the key, and execution is all about people. And there, I think the big insight for us, of course, was hiring more for will than skill, right? And that's again a journey that's been for us, right? A lot of times we went in saying, hey, because we don't have the time, let's hire for a person who's done exactly this many times over in the past. And then you realize that because most of these organizations and startups early on are not built on processes, it's built on, right, how teams come together and deliver, and that if the people are at odds with each other, it's a lot more of a problem, right? At one point we were measuring and we were asking teams, right? We were saying, how much time are you spending internally versus externally, right? With customers versus this thing. Yeah. And at some point they said it is 30, 40%, and we got scared and we said, okay, this is not how we're going to build this. And everywhere we went, even in newer countries, and Southeast Asia is tough because it's 6 countries. It's not one Southeast Asia as a region.
Certainly.
Right? And that, again, finding that cultural fit, finding that intent, people with intent and hunger more than this thing, where we don't understand the culture, right? Like that's, I mean, in all of these countries, there's also a cultural influence of who stands out on these elements. Understanding that was the effort, but it was worthwhile the effort. I think today we have more than 100-member team there, right? And all of them are very, very ingrained into the cultural context of Darwinbox as a whole, as an organization. Yeah. And and it also took a lot of effort from the early team to also change a little bit so that we could bring them in much more easily, because probably the Indian culture is a little different as well.
Agreed.
So it's a combination of both, but I think if we take out the veneer of, oh, this is just values or just a list of values, and say, these are the people I want to work with, I think that's the best way to bring them.
No, I think you make a great point on intent and will, and that's the toughest to actually assess when you're hiring talent, right? It is the toughest. So with that, with Nilesh, you've actually, there's always a question of, you have internal talent, people who've been with you. How do you get them to bigger jobs, bigger roles, versus getting lateral hires? Because you do want to show people the path, they've worked with you before. How do you make some of those choices? Because that's important as the organization grows. And to Imran's point, to build an institution.
I failed in both. I'll start with that. So I think the, relationships are very important, as Rohit said, because to make somebody understand that they are probably not able to scale to a next level, let's say, right?
Yeah.
I think just being candid is one thing, and trying to have a conversation of that nature helps somebody who is not able to scale find the right stuff for what they can do. And you're also trying to be, true to them, basically. At the same time, you have to work with people and give them time in many cases and some people do actually phenomenal when you give them the opportunity. And it's just that sometimes the time is less, but I've seen, given enough time, some people have outperformed and have done phenomenal, and they were never cut out to do that.
Yeah.
And they just did extremely well, which is the will question. And coming from the lateral, I think in lateral, it's, as you said, it's very hard.
It is hard.
to look at, because with Zoom conversations, it's even harder.
True.
But I think if you spend enough time, and what I have done, and as a company we try to do, is that when we hire a senior person, I particularly try to make them talk to other people in the team. Those could be people who may be junior in the company, where they may have an interaction. So you get a wider perspective about the same person. It's like looking at an object. If you just look at from one angle, you only see one side of the object. But if you put like four eyes on it, you'll get a full view of the object. And I think it gives you a reasonable perspective. And then if all the people decide to go ahead and still make a mistake, I mean, that's fine, right? It was a collective mistake. So that's probably one method I've tried to
Understood.
get more closer to the right answer.
Right answer, yeah. No, that's fantastic, and that's a great input in terms of just getting to review a person and what they bring to the table from multiple lenses. You know, Srinivas, you've had a unique challenge, if you will. You're actually building a category, actually disrupting a category as well, so a lot of things. And in that market, where you're defining and creating a market, to find the right talent, because you really don't have that much expertise to go with, how did you go about it?
See, we were very clear. 2 out of 3 co-founders were outside of the real estate industry. So the moment we established our product market fit, we were very certain that we wanted to go higher from the industry, primarily from the large brokerages, the GLLs and the CBREs. And fortunately, we knew most rainmakers in that space. So look, our business is about closing large transactions like Apple, Microsoft, Shell, and MasterCard, and so on. So we have been able to very successfully hire some of the top deal makers from the large brokerage firms for a variety of reasons. One is that typically in the brokerages firms, they've gone from transaction to transaction.
True.
Whereas internally at Tablespace, we have given them a much larger sense of ownership of the client. So they originate the client, they bring in the client, and they manage the entire sort of life cycle of the client. So that's something that they've truly appreciated. And also internally, just in terms of how we help our sales team sort of evaluate deals, is that we have a technology platform on which the sales team, without anyone's guidance, is able to go evaluate deals on their own and determine, is this something we should do or we should not do. And I think when you empower your teams that way, their level of independence and their gratification levels are very high. And there's obviously network effect when they come into Tablespace, they're able to bring in other people from the previous organizations as well. So it's worked well for us.
Thank you then, and it's difficult, but you've done it. And I know we're running short of time, but because we have Imran and brings a wealth of knowledge and expertise, I think we'll extend for a few minutes, Imran. I'm going to squeeze in 2 questions to you. As investors, what are the kind of metrics that you look at as businesses to say, hey, is this business going to hit the 100 million mark? What is it that you look for? And most importantly, what are the challenges and temptations that one should avoid? Because there is things that, easy revenue, few changes in product mixes. What should one avoid?
Thanks, Shivani. Let me answer the second. I think counterintuitively, the things to avoid is to do too much. Because often the answer to scale up is what not to do as opposed to what to do. And there's a lot of temptation when you have money in the bank to go out and buy companies or hire all over the place or spend in newer areas that are untested. Remember, it's very interesting that when you see startups, most successful ones are born in an environment of scarcity and frugality. And their biggest test comes when that changes, right? So so I think that's what not to do is important. On metrics, it varies by business. If you're a SaaS business, increasingly we look at evidence that your new customer acquisition engine is working, but also your ability to land and expand is working. And often at times like this, when people are talking about cash flows and profits, and I'm amazed that the same venture capitalists are writing blogs about free cash flow. It was a dirty word in the last 2 years. And where does this free cash flow come from? This comes from often a laser focus on existing clients. It comes from areas where you don't have to spend. You don't have to throw headcount on. It comes from really squeezing out from what is already working. In other B2C companies like EdTech and so on, often it boils down to sales efficiency as opposed to a land grab for top of the funnel, because top of the funnel is a capital heavy pursuit, but conversion is about processes, it's about product market fit, Sometimes it's about getting the right tools, and I don't want to steal Nilesh's thunder, but sometimes it's just about that.
The right sales tool. Perfect. Just so that we can quickly wrap up and each of you really have a takeaway here. I'm going to request each of the panelists to tell us one do and one don't to get to this. So what's the mantra? So Imran, I'm going to start with you.
Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
So what is the mantra, the one do and one don't to hit the 100 million
One?
mark? What should you do? What shouldn't you do to hit the 100 million mark?
To hit 100.
So
Okay.
we want the mantra.
So what you should do is listen to Nilesh. You should really listen to your customers and be immersed in the market. That is the absolute non-negotiable. And what you shouldn't do is forget what got you to a successful point, which is being frugal, focusing on innovation and the pace of innovation, not lose that focus.
So it's interesting, when capital running dry, you have investors tell you to be frugal. Clearly, Imran. Rohit?
So maybe you should just buy Darwin box for HR automation. That's a do. But on a serious note, I think doing right by customer, doing right by the team are the two do's for me always.
Perfect.
Right. And don't is, I think, desperate hiring. I think all of us have gone through it. We continue to go there. But as much as possible, avoid desperate hiring is my don't.
Srinivas, how about you?
I think one of the most important lessons I've learned as an entrepreneur is that is to not to look at any situation as glass half empty or glass half full,
Perfect.
but the fact that as an entrepreneur you can pour water into the glass, right?
Fantastic. That's the new one, actually. That's well said. Yeah. Nilesh, other than sales, I think Imran's done the sales
Yeah,
for you.
no.
So.
I think if you can hire all the good people, great people, that's one thing you should always be doing. And then save, don't spend too much money on things which you shouldn't be spending on. So.
Perfect. I can speak for myself. I think the great takeaways in terms of what you should focus on, how do you build the businesses, focus on team, on culture, being true to your customers, and being wise with how you spend the money, which is true for all of us, I suppose, at one level. So I hope you enjoyed this discussion. It's been great conversation, and I would like to thank each of the panelists for making time from their busy schedules to share their perspectives. Thank you so much.